Welcome back to this video about Introduction to Object-Oriented Programming. Object-Oriented Programming is all about thinking in terms of objects. Before we get into depth with this, we will talk a little bit about structured programming. If you have done any programming with languages like C or Pascal, you'd be doing something called procedural or structural programming. Procedural or structured programming involves thinking in terms of procedures. These are also called methods or functions. So let's say I have a problem to solve. The first thing I would try and do is to split the problem into multiple functions or multiple procedures. I would start thinking in terms of, okay, what are the functions I would need to write? What are the different steps involved in doing this? For example, let's say I would want to fly. So I would want to fly from one place to another place. Then I would start thinking in terms of the different steps involved. I'll say, okay, travel to airport, find a check-in counter, check in, pass security check. So we are thinking more in terms of what are the important methods that we would need to create and how to combine them to solve the problem at hand. Procedural or structured programming is all about thinking in terms of functions, or these are also called procedures. Object oriented programming brings a new thought process around this. It says, okay, why don't we talk in terms of the different objects that are involved in the problem and also think about what is the data they would contain and what are the actions you can perform on them. Okay, is this sounding complex? Then you are not alone. That's how I felt when I was introduced to object oriented programming as well about 15 years back. Let's take an example and try and understand how to think in terms of object oriented programming. So let's take the example of taking a flight again. The first thing that we would be thinking about is what are the different objects that are involved. An aeroplane, a air hostess, a passenger, a airport, a cab that I would need to take to the airport, also the different persons that might be involved. So when we are thinking object oriented, we are trying to identify the different things that are involved in our problem. The first thing which we would try and do is to identify the things like airplane, air hostess, passenger, the pilot, and things like that. Once we identify the things that are involved, we identify what data you would want to use about that specific thing. So what is the data that can represent an aeroplane? Maybe which airline, what is the make of the aeroplane, what is the type of an aeroplane, whether it's an Airbus or not, and what is the position, where is it currently. So that's kind of typically the data. And also you think in terms of actions. You'd be thinking in terms of the actions that you can perform on an aeroplane. Take off, land, cruise, a lot of things that you can do on an aeroplane. If you look at the air hostess, then probably the name of the air hostess address is the data. And there might be actions like wish, serve, and a number of other actions. When we are thinking about a passenger, his name, maybe his address, and a lot of information can be the data. And probably the actions he can perform is take cab, do a check-in, walk, smile, run, board the aircraft, and a lot of such actions. So when we are thinking object-oriented programming, we are thinking about what are the objects, what is the data they might contain, and what are the actions that can be performed on them. The data that an object might contain is also called state of the object. The state of an object can change over a period of time. The position of an airplane now is different from the position of an airplane maybe after an hour. The actions that can be performed on the object are also called its behavior. In summary, the big picture is this. Structured programming is all about thinking about procedures or methods. That's all we would be thinking about in structured programming. In object-oriented programming, we try and think in terms of objects. and what kind of data they might contain, and what are the operations or what are the actions that can be performed on these objects. If all this seems a little confusing to you, do not worry about it. We would be using more than 5 examples to discuss this in detail in this specific section. I'll see you in the next video.